All right, everybody. Well, we'll let a few more people here join in, but first and foremost, welcome. Good evening. I'm Adam. If I haven't met you guys yet, thank you so much for being with us tonight. In just a minute, I'm going to introduce my co-host, Ben Adams. He's one of the top mortgage professionals in the country. But first, I just wanted to share something with you guys that I think Ben, for sure, along with myself, are hearing almost on a daily basis right now, which is just, Adam, Ben, is now the right time to buy? And that's probably why a lot of us are on tonight, just to get a little bit more clarity on that, with interest rates, affordability concerns, all of the constant headlines that we're seeing now on a daily and hourly basis at this point right now. It's very easy to feel uncertain. However, what we've really found, and it's pretty simple really, is just that buyers without a plan, they're feeling stressed, they're second guessing everything. However, buyers with that strategy that really helps them make a strong decision, they're the ones that are making moves, they're moving confidently, and they're still finding success. So, people are still winning even in the Denver market today, but it really does come down to positioning, education, and just having that solid game plan ahead of time. So before we dive into everything tonight, you guys, you're going to see on the right-hand side of the screen, there's a chat box. And on that chat box, feel free to engage with both Ben and myself, ask any questions you might have as we go through all of this stuff. It's going to maybe feel at times like you're maybe drinking through a fire hose. We're going to try and just give you guys as much info as we can in the next about 45, 50 minutes. So when we're talking through specific parts of the content tonight, if you guys have questions on that right then and there, feel free to ask that question in the chat box. If you guys are, maybe just not quite ready to ask that question at that point, you can always just still type it in. And at the end, we're going to do a live Q&A, and we'll make sure that we answer those questions first, the ones that are kind of at the top of the queue. So just again, though, guys, really happy to have you on tonight. Looks like we've got quite a few people from kind of all over the place. I recognize a couple names here, so that's great. Okay, so with that all being said, let's just dive right in. And I'm going to just go through a couple quick slides first, and then I'm going to, again, introduce you guys to Ben. So, the biggest thing is I just wanted to first, start off with something that's so important, and that's just, why it's so important to have a strategy, a proven strategy, well in advance before you're actually writing any offers on a house. Because, most buyers in Denver, they're playing defense, and they're really paying the price because of that, because right now is such an opportune time, if it makes sense for the right person in that environment, for them to be a buyer. So, the traditional buyer just kind of always tends to be the one that waits till the last minute to get serious, maybe acting with a lot of emotion, competing not on their terms, but on the other party, the seller's terms. Oftentimes missing some of these times where you have a lot of leverage, like I was just kind of teasing about it being such a great time right now, if it makes the most sense for you, just leaving a lot of money on the table. However, the strategic buyer is the one that's preparing early, understanding how the game really works, using a lot of the timing and negotiation to make that advantage as big as possible, and just identifying some of these other hidden opportunities. And this difference is massive. It really can be. So just really wanted to, kind of start you guys off with this little teaser of what we're going to go through tonight. Going to be sharing with you guys a lot of really, really important strategies, techniques to help save a lot of money, keep that money in your pocket, avoid some of these costly inspection mistakes. We're going to dive into a bunch tonight. So, and then just to kind of close it out, the result by doing this kind of stuff is Denver buyers are going to be paying less. They're going to definitely have better deals, keeping more money in their pocket. So with all that said, Ben, I'd love to welcome you back to another webinar, man. We've been doing these now, once, if not twice a month for, I think, almost a year now, and just getting a lot of really good connections through it. I'm really enjoying just doing them with you. So would like just to introduce you and just share with everybody a few reasons why you're on this tonight. And that's first off, because you're one of my best friends, a great guy, but also just your track record, over 22 years of industry experience. You're also a CU alumni, personally funded over $300 million of deals, do a lot of this yourself. You've got a lot of investment properties, just somebody that really is passionate about not just the mortgage industry, but really just about helping people with financial literacy. Yeah, just being a great guy. So welcome.
Oh, I'm so excited to be here, and thank you for having me on. And that's really what I want to do. I want to help people make better decisions. I mean, let's face it, I made a lot of mistakes myself when I was pursuing real estate. And the reason for that is because our education system is not set up in a way where we educate or train anyone or our youth on how to make sound, responsible financial decisions. And buying a home qualifying for a mortgage, knowing if it's the right time to buy. Very, very important. So I've made a lot of mistakes. I've learned from those. I want to be able to be a resource to the folks that I work with. Now, let me introduce you. Why listen to Adam? 42-year Colorado and Denver native. Recently ranked 5th out of 344 Denver agents in sales volume. He's also a certified real estate negotiation expert, host of Living in Denver YouTube channel, and then we also co-host the Pursuit of Progress podcast together every Friday. So, Adam, thank you for putting this together.
Yeah, man, I'm excited. We're having a good time with these, and hopefully everybody that's on tonight can get at least a few little nuggets of value. And again, guys, if you have any questions when going through any of this tonight, just don't be a stranger. Make sure you guys take advantage of that chat on the right-hand side. Definitely a really good place just to connect and ask any questions there. And with that, let's just kind of get started with that. So anybody that's on tonight, why don't you guys go ahead, if you have it available, get on your right-hand side of your screen. If you're on a phone, it might be a little bit more difficult to find where you access this, but just on the chat, just like to kind of get a pulse of the room, on a scale of 1 to 10, just how confident are you guys feeling right now to buy a home in Denver? Is it a 1, meaning that you're just completely deflated, feel defeated, feel like there's no way in hell you're ever going to be able to buy a home in Denver? Or maybe you're somewhere in the middle, or maybe you're feeling pretty confident and maybe you're a 9 or a 10, which is great. There's still some value we're going to be providing tonight, even for those people. So if you guys think about it, go ahead and put that in the chat. That'd be helpful. And then let's just go ahead now. When you guys are doing that, I'm going to kind of continue on here and just start off with, before we go into the meat and potatoes of what we're going to go through tonight, I wanted just to spend maybe 3 to 5 minutes on just the market, get Ben's take on a few things, but also just share with you guys. Maybe you're not keeping that close of an eye on things like Ben and I are, since this is our day-to-day job, but just a couple things that I think are worth sharing with you guys. So, the biggest one that maybe all of you guys have been seeing is just these interest rates and how they've been very fluctuating recently. We did this webinar last month, and we were really excited because we had 3, almost 4-year lows where it was actually all the way down to 5.98%. Ben's at the lowest it got to, I think.
Yeah, we bottomed out about 6 weeks ago.
Yep. And 5.98, I think, was the lowest, right around there. So just under 6%. And as of this morning, we were back up to 6.47. So there's just about 0.5% of range that we're seeing. And there's a little bit more to it, though, than just that. And that's what we're going to share with you guys. So, just kind of looking at 2025 versus this year. In late 2025, the median home price in Denver was right at $558,000. And that's actually 4% down from 2024. So, we are seeing this kind of unique environment right now where for years and years and years, every year, Colorado, Denver real estate was up and up and up. And it's kind of a new territory for a lot of us when it's not continuing on that trajectory. So just kind of an interesting, kind of change where it's been these past, 12 to 18 months. But the great news, if you guys are actively or maybe aspirationally wanting to be a buyer here in Denver, the active inventory in Denver is still very high. Ben actually shared this with me earlier today that I think, Ben, you said there was over 600,000 more sellers than active buyers in the Denver market right now. Is that correct?
Nationally, that was the national market, but the Denver market also follows that national trend where there are more sellers than buyers. And so when there's more supply than there is demand, it means that the demand, the buyers in this case, are going to have more opportunities to dictate terms, ask for sales price reductions, get seller concessions, and really hit hard on the things that are important to them as a buyer.
Mm-hmm. Yep. Time on market trends. I think actually I saw this. So this is explaining that it's 60 days. Last month when I made this is actually about 55 when I checked last. So going down a little bit. And part of that is also just because we're going into the peak time of year for real estate. A lot of people are kind of planning out their summer, trying to, move during the summer. So if they have children, they're able to get into the new school or, just have everything in order before the fall. So this is always going to be one of the busiest times of year in real estate, but we're seeing this number, this days on market, still much, much higher than it was just a few years ago. So that's one of the biggest changes. But, negotiation is this kind of overwhelming benefit right now for buyers. Is there's so much room for negotiation. If you're a buyer, you have so much leverage because there is so much inventory that's sitting, again, up to 60 days right now, days on market. So, sellers are starting to panic a little bit at times. They need to get that house sold, and we're going to talk through a little bit of some strategies here in a bit of how to make sure you guys are getting the best deal possible.
This let me jump in there real quick, Adam. This month, today is the last day of the month, March 31st. I had 10 closings this month here in the Denver market area, and every single one either had a sales price reduction or a seller concession, where the seller was actually paying for the buyer's closing costs, or they were providing a concession so the buyer could buy down the interest rate. That is huge. That did not exist 2 or 3 years ago, 5 years ago. So this is the first time in the last 20 years that buyers have had control over the market. And so this is the strongest buyer's market we've seen really in the last 15 to 20 years.
Yeah, man, that's crazy. So we'll just kind of wrap this first part up, you guys. You don't need to rush, but you do need a plan. The best homes are always going to buyers who are ready, and that's ready meaning well in advance of ever even going into a home to tour a property. Timing is not necessarily always going to be strategy, but confidence is always going to be guesswork. And preparation is what really saves buyers a lot of real money. So if the right home does pop up in a few months, just want to make sure that if you guys are actively trying to buy something, that you guys are in that position ahead of time where you are able to, have a confident, stable ability to make the right decision when that time comes. So before we kind of dive into what we call our close method, which is an acronym we created to just kind of help walk you through this home buying process and share some of these tips that we're going to do with you guys. Before you guys kind of go through that with us, if there's certain, areas that really feel kind of overwhelming when we're going through it, I've got over 2 hours of video that you can just kind of go back to and access and just kind of reference back to if you have certain areas that you really want extra help with. So after tonight's webinar, I'll be sharing a few different emails with you guys. One of them has some links that you guys can access some of the stuff later on. So with that being said, Ben, you want to just kind of share maybe for a second with them about this 5-step journey, is how we kind of came up with this acronym. I'm going to go through each of these individually, but just before we get started, Ben, wasn't sure if you wanted to add anything.
Yeah, I just made a comment in the chat where if anyone does have any specific concerns about this Denver market, you're welcome to share those in the chat, and we can have some dialogue around that at the end of the presentation here. But please feel free to share that. This is why I'm here, right? The 5 steps of the home buyer journey. Adam and I came up with this. We call this our close method. And what this is to help buyers understand what the correct process is as far as getting pre-approved and going through the home buying journey. So C, you want to connect with a lender. Once you're connected with a lender, you get pre-approved, then you start looking at properties. O, you're going to start submitting offers. Once you start submitting offers, you're then going to secure the deal, S. And then finally, the E is going to be execute the closing, where you have your final walkthrough and then you sign all of your paperwork on the day of closing. We're going to go into more depth on each one here, but just think of it as the close method, the 5 steps of the home buyer journey.
Yep. If you want to close on the right home, remember the close method. So this first one, step 1, is, Ben, a little bit more of your wheelhouse. So I'll let you kind of take and spearhead on this first one, but this is that same number I was just sharing with you guys, 6.47 as of this morning. Share with them a little bit about just how to, financially prepare to buy a home. Some of these people that are on tonight, maybe they've already bought a home before, so we don't need to get too much into the weeds, but just kind of a nice overview of, what it takes.
Yeah, and go back to that prior screen really quick, if you don't mind, with the interest rates. This is something that's been coming up a lot in my conversations with buyers just this last week or two. And the reason for that is because interest rates, as you said, Adam, were 5.98 just 3 or 4 weeks ago. And all of a sudden, with the Iran conflict, the Middle East news, things are inflating, oil prices are going up, gas prices are going up, interest rates are going up. And of course, that is going to impact affordability. It is going to impact monthly payment. But what we're talking about is there are ways to combat that right now. When you get a seller concession, you can do a temporary buy down. So what a temporary buy down is you buy the interest rate down on a temporary basis. There's a couple of different strategies. There's a 2-1 buy down and a 3-2-1 buy down. So even if rates are at 6.5 right now, I have some buyers I'm working with right now. They're targeting a 3-2-1 buy down. In year 1, the interest rate is going to be 3.5. In year 2, the interest rate is going to be 4.5. In year 3, the interest rate is going to be 5.5. And they're getting the seller to pay for that, what Adam mentioned here, through a seller concession. And so those are some of the strategies that we're talking about. Yes, interest rates have gone up, but there is still ways to get that monthly payment and that rate down if you know what you're doing, if you have a plan, and if you've talked through that with your mortgage and real estate professional. So how to financially prepare to buy a home. Step number 1, you want to get pre-approved for a mortgage. Why does this matter? Because this can give you an edge in a competitive market. Yes, there are more sellers than buyers, but when you start writing offers, you want your offer to stand out. If you're looking at homes at $600,000 or less, that's still going to be a competitive price point because there's only so many homes in this Denver market that are priced under $600,000. So when you can go to a seller and a listing agent, and you can say that I'm fully pre-approved, not just pre-qualified. I've submitted all of my financials. I filled out an application. My credit's been pulled. I've turned in my W-2s, my pay stubs, my tax returns. The lender has verified my employment, and it says all of that. That is going to help your offer stand out in the event that there are competing offers. More importantly, though, or as important, you want to know what your options are. Are you eligible for a temporary buy down? Are you eligible for a permanent buy down? Do you need help with down payment assistance? Maybe you're a first-time home buyer and there are programs out there that are going to offer you better financing terms. So when you get pre-approved, it's not just so you can present that offer to the seller. It's also to know what your options are, what your purchasing power is. So ultimately you can make an informed financial decision.
Really quick, Ben, before we move on, just one little side note, because this happened just recently with a client that I was working with that I actually had Ben help with as well, is even if you're not considering buying a home maybe for 2 years, maybe it's a year and a half, maybe it's a 2027 goal that you have. It's great that you're on tonight because that's the biggest thing, is just being prepared ahead of time and absorbing and just taking in as much of this educational content wherever you're getting it from as possible. But
Yeah.
what we just had happen was somebody that was self-employed making pretty good money and very easily could have qualified. However, since they were self-employed and it was a new business, within that first 2 years, it's a little bit more challenging to have that income and that money qualify as part of their earnings. So long-winded way of just saying that, even if you're not that serious today, it's still worth kind of going down this path with a lender just to make sure that you know everything you need to know. And if there's little changes that maybe you need to do today so you can pre-qualify and get pre-approved in a year from now, how important that is.
Yeah, I think that's very important. And if you are thinking that you would like to be a homeowner, or if you'd like to enter the market as a prospective home buyer sometime between now and the next 18 months, and maybe you're unsure of what your credit looks like, or maybe you're thinking, I want to get my credit score up, I want to improve that, or what does my income look like? Go ahead and still fill out an application with a lender. And a lot of lenders like North Point, where I work, we have the ability to do a soft credit pull. And a soft credit pull, what that means is that it's not going to show up as an actual hard inquiry on your credit report. There's not any cost involved. There is no risk, but it will allow your lender to build out a plan for you if you do need to get your credit up. Maybe you want to pay off some debt, or you want to improve your purchasing power. Being more proactive is never a bad thing. And it goes in line with what Adam is talking about as far as being as prepared as possible. So the more prepared you are, the better decisions you're going to make. It's going to be less emotional, and then you'll be able to stick to your plan and really understand what your options are.
Mm-hmm. Well, so those are some of the things that you need to be prepared for ahead of time. Now let's fast forward and maybe once you're within maybe 6 months of maybe writing an offer on a home, some very, very important things to do ahead of time, but also just as important things not to do. So share a few of these. These are really, really, really good stuff here.
Yeah. And so you don't want to do any of this really within 6 months of planning a home purchase. And in some cases, you may already be pre-approved. And if you are pre-approved, you definitely don't want to do any of these things, and especially once you're under contract. Now, certain things can happen, and if something comes up on this list, go ahead and have a conversation with your mortgage professional and communicate that to your real estate agent. But for the most part, you really don't want to do any of these things. So you don't want to change bank accounts in the middle of a transaction or in the middle of a pre-approval. It can complicate things. I have a customer I'm working with right now. She has these large sums of money going from this account to that account to this account. Bank of America, US Bank, Chase, Wells Fargo. And so now we have to paper trail all of that. We have to get bank statements from Chase showing the funds being moved to Wells Fargo, showing them to going to US Bank. People sometimes do this. I have no idea why, but you don't want to be doing making any big moves with your money. You also don't want to co-sign on loans for anyone. You don't want to co-sign on any type of car loan, especially. And just remember, I have made this mistake personally. And so this is why I'm so passionate about this, because I made this mistake 7 years ago, back in 2019, and I'm still paying for it. I had a friend of mine who needed help qualifying for a mortgage. So he asked me to co-sign, and I told him no over and over and over. And because he's my friend, he convinced me to finally say yes. And remember, if someone is asking you to co-sign, it means one of two things. Number one, they don't have sufficient income to repay the debt. Or number two, they have a documented pattern of behavior of not paying their bills on time. And number three, they're normally going to be a friend or a family member. And a lot of times, if you co-sign, it's going to cause friction in that relationship. In my case, we had a huge falling out after I co-signed for him. It caused a ton of friction in our relationship. And that debt is still on my credit report 7 years later. And when you co-sign for someone, that's going to show up on your credit report. You're going to be liable for it, and it's going to have to be included in your debt to income ratio. There's going to be some cases where it can be excluded, but it's very difficult to exclude that debt once you've co-signed. So don't ever co-sign for anyone. You also don't want to close or open any new credit cards. That's another thing that comes up. If you have your credit pulled at all during the application process or once you're under contract, the credit bureaus will notify your lender. So make sure that you don't have any new credit inquiries. You also don't want to make any large purchases. Another big mistake that I see home buyers make is they're very excited. They're emotional about their upcoming purchase. Maybe it's their first home or their dream home. They want to start buying furniture. And so they go online, they start picking out furniture. They know that it's not going to arrive for 3 or 4 weeks after the purchase. But if they're making those purchases or taking out new debt prior to closing, that has to be factored in their debt to income ratio. So you don't want to make any large purchases prior to closing. And then you also don't want to have any cash deposits into your bank account. That's something that is not okay, whether it's a Fannie Mae, Freddie Mac, FHA, or VA loan. Cash deposits have to be sourced. And since they're cash, it's always very difficult to do that. So any assets that are being used towards qualifying either for down payment, cash to close, or reserves, there has to be at least a 60-day history from a paper trail on where those funds are coming from. So those are things that you just want to be aware of. Those are the things that you don't want to do.
And before passing it back over to you here in a second, I think this is another one that maybe is even more important than all of that stuff, just because it's very tangible and it's very easy to have a direct impact on improving this. And I'm speaking firsthand about this from just some of this that you'd shared with me a couple of years ago.
Yeah.
This credit utilization score and just how important it is, again, just to be doing the groundwork ahead of time to make sure that you have as high of a credit score as you possibly can. So there's two different types of a credit utilization score, both a local and a global. Share a little bit about that with everybody too, because this is a really, really big one.
Yeah. When it comes to credit, if you're looking at a conventional loan, conventional loans evaluate and manage credit based off of tiers. And it starts at 780. So if you're 780 or above, you're considered A++. And then from there, it's every 20 points. So 780 is the top score, then 760, then 740, 720, 680, all the way down to 620. So the higher your score, the more favorable your financing terms are going to be. Now, with certain programs, first-time homebuyer programs, down payment assistance, the score matters less. As long as you meet the minimum score, you're going to qualify and get the same financing terms because those are considered affordable housing loans. But on a traditional loan, the higher the score, the better the terms are. Now, when it comes to credit score, a lot of people mistakenly think that you just need to pay your bills on time. And that is important. And that is the number one factor, timely payments, which is 35% of your credit score. What people don't realize, what people don't realize is that number two is the utilization of revolving accounts, which makes up 30% of your score. And a lot of people have no idea what this is or how it works. And let me explain it to you. So if you have a credit card and the limit is $10,000, that means that technically speaking, you could go and run up a balance of $10,000 or whatever the limit is. However, the credit bureaus, TransUnion, Equifax, and Experian will start to ding your credit score once that credit utilization goes over 30%. So if your limit is $10,000, but your balance goes over 3,000 or 30%, that is going to start to adversely impact your credit score. And that's why a lot of times people will have a credit score that's 100 or 150 points lower than what it could be, even if they're making all their payments on time, is because those revolving accounts, credit cards, in-store charge cards, Amex, Costco cards, places like that have a utilization or a balance that's over 30%. So you want to keep that individual card under 30%, which is the local credit utilization. But then the credit bureaus are also going to look at all of your revolving accounts combined, and you want that to also be under 30%. One mistake that I used to make is that even though my global credit utilization was under 30%, for example, I had 5 cards, and maybe my global credit utilization was only 10%, which is great. I was making all of my purchases on one card, and that specific card did not have a high credit limit. And so the credit limit at the time was only around $5,000, but my monthly bills were anywhere from $2,500 to $3,500. So I was over 50%, and that was really impacting my credit score. So these are kind of the things that I've learned the hard way by mistake. And these are the things that I'm trying to help share with others so I can be a resource and put them in the very best position possible with their credit scores, so they qualify for the very best financing terms.
It's great. Thanks, man. Yeah, and really quick, actually, go back a slide. After tonight, I'm also going to be sending you guys a bunch of stuff, as I said earlier. One of those is this credit repair playbook. It's got a lot more info on this specifically. So if this is kind of piquing your interest a little bit, make sure you guys check that out, because this is a great way, again, to do something. Even if you're not ready to buy right now, it's still, some really good early on strategies. So that was the first step of the close method, the C. Now we're on the L, and this is a really important one too, which is, looking for homes and locating where that perfect home might be for you guys. And what I wanted to kind of go through is 2 little exercises that you might want to do with whoever you're going to be living in this next home with. These are really kind of fun, but also great tools to just to make sure everybody's on the same page. And what I mean by that is how important it is to understand that everybody has what we call non-negotiables or priorities. And this is just things that are maybe either must-haves, nice to haves, or maybe even some deal breakers. And this is just really important because you kind of think of this almost like a funnel. And at the top of the funnel, where it's the biggest, this is where we want to make sure that we're really starting our search out, where we're not finding stuff that is maybe checking off 8 out of 10 boxes, but the 2 that it doesn't check off are non-negotiables, where emotion starts taking over and you fall in love with the house, but it's not in the right school district, or it doesn't have the big enough garage, or doesn't have a main floor bedroom that you might need, whatever it may be. So by sitting down at the dinner table and just talking through this openly with everybody, obviously the one that's buying the house, or the parents, you guys might have a little bit more say than the kiddos, but it's still great to involve everybody in this and just talk through, again, what are your must-haves, what are your nice-to-haves, and any deal breakers. So I'll use 2 quick little examples of this so you guys know what I'm talking about. A must-have could be, as an example, let's just say it's a family, husband and wife, and they've got 2 kids. And right now they're sharing a bedroom, but in a couple of years, they're going to be a bit older and they need their own rooms. Well, that could be an example where a must-have is you have to have at least a 3-bedroom. So you have a bedroom for each of your 2 kiddos and one for you guys. So that would be an example of a must-have. A nice-to-have could be something a little bit maybe more unique. So for anybody that's on tonight, I know I saw at least a couple people that I know are from out of state, because I've talked to you guys a little bit before already. A lot of times out of staters, they come to Colorado because there's so many fun activities, hobbies, things to do outdoors specifically. And a lot of these activities and hobbies and things, let's just use a few examples like mountain biking, camping, road biking, skiing, all the great stuff that we have out here. You come out here, you don't have any of that stuff yet, and you just assume that, we have 2 cars. My wife has a car, I have a car. We just need a 2-car garage. All of a sudden, you come out here, you pick up skiing, you pick up mountain biking. all that needs to go somewhere, all that stuff. Now, all of a sudden, half of your garage is full of your fun stuff. And now one of you is parking out on the street. So a nice to have that happens a lot out here with people that move out here that don't think about this ahead of time is a nice to have would be having a 3-car garage, even though you only really need 2, or an oversized 2-car garage would be a nice to have. So just a couple examples of that. So that's really fun to do. And also then to share that with whoever you're working with for a realtor. That way we're also on the same page and can really have that in the back of our mind and prioritize that when we start the search. So the other one, though, is what I call the home buyer's dilemma. What this is basically the pick 2 out of 3. So, everybody maybe that's on tonight, I know Ben and I are part of this group where we don't have an endless supply of money. We have a budget. So because of that, it's very challenging sometimes to get all 3 of these. Usually, out here in Colorado, I can help when I'm helping clients, I can get 2 out of the 3. Sometimes we can get all 3, but it's important to at least realize that this exists. So the 3 things are price, location, and condition. So price, literally just the price of the home. What's the amount you feel comfortable spending on the home? Location, where is it located within the Denver metro area, as an example? And then condition is more about the type of the home. Is it a brand new home? Maybe it's an older home that was built 50 years ago. Is it a townhome? Is it a ranch style? That kind of stuff. So picking the 2 that are the most important to you is really important. So I'll use an example of Sloan Lake is this really fun area that I used to live in. It's just west of downtown Denver. Lots going on, lots of great restaurants, lots of parks, just a really fun place to live. So let's just say that maybe I'm helping, let's see, I see Sam's on that. So let's just say Sam is really interested in Sloan Lake area. Sam has a budget of, let's just use as an example, $500,000. So he's got that price. He's got that location. Well, $500,000 home in that Sloan Lake area, the condition of the home, we're going to have to make a little sacrifice. You're not going to be able to buy a brand new 3,500 square foot single family home for that price there. So if that's the issue, or that's the one that's kind of lacking a bit, we're going to have to make an adjustment. Maybe instead of that new home, maybe we have to buy one that's a bit older and needs a little TLC, needs a little bit of improvements maybe being done on the home over the next few years. So 2 out of 3 is always good. 3 is best, but that's just an example of that. Or I'll just use one other one. Let's just say up in Commerce City, where there's some certain areas near there that are really fun for people that maybe work or travel a lot for work, where they want to be close to the Denver International Airport. So that's the location that they want to be in. They know for sure that they want to have a price of a home between 5 and 6. I'm sorry, I'll use conditions. So they want a new build home. They want a brand new home. They don't want to have to deal with any sort of issues. They want turnkey. Open the door, turn the key, go into the home. Everything's perfect. That's the condition. Again, we talked about that area kind of close to DIA. Well, for those 2, you're going to have a lot more of a range. You're going to be able to find homes that fit both of those, and maybe 500, maybe even going up to 600 or 700. So that's just a nice, again, way to kind of wrap your head around it from a different perspective, and just to start thinking about some of this stuff. If you do that early on, that'll really help when it does come time to search for homes, just to make sure that every home that we're looking at is actually relevant and it's not going to get kind of confusing because emotion is taking over. And then before I pass it back over to Ben, you guys, on our the email that I'm going to be sending out later that I keep talking about, on there, I have a link for my website, just adamstillsdenver.com. But on there, there's this interactive map, and I have over 20 of the top areas within Denver. So for anybody that's not that familiar with Denver, whether you live in a different state or even if you are local here, there's still areas that you might not even know about really that well yet. So on the interactive map, you can click each of these different areas, get more info on demographics, what kind of schools are in the area, how they're rated, good restaurants, just a lot of stuff. And that'll really help you guys kind of narrow down or maybe find a few new areas you might want to put on your list. All right, Ben, I kind of feel like I was talking really fast there. Anything else you want to add before we move on?
I don't think so. Ready for step 3, though, which is my favorite part, crafting a winning offer.
So this is actually my favorite as well. And that's because there is such a huge amount of advantage that we can have as buyers if we really do this correctly. And that's because so many realtors out there just don't really put in the effort to what I like to call do discovery. So what I mean by this is to craft a winning offer. It's so important for the real estate agent that's representing the buyer, so I'll use me as the example. If I'm representing one of you and we're going out looking at homes and we finally find this one in a great area, we talk through that price, location, condition, we really identified one that fits what you're looking for, we're ready to make an offer. The first thing that I always do is I actually pick up the phone and I call and I talk to the listing agent, the person that is selling the home. And I do this for kind of a specific reason that a lot of people don't really think about. And that's to understand the motivation of the seller. This listing agent, they won't always share this information with me. If I was a listing agent, I wouldn't necessarily give all of this information to a buyer because this is giving up some of our leverage, some of our negotiating power. But as a buyer, this is great info to have because oftentimes what the seller is looking for isn't necessarily only the highest price possible that they're going to get for their home. There's a lot of stuff that happens in life, whether it's maybe divorce, maybe it's an elderly parent that passed away and now the home is in probate. The kids are trying to figure out what they want to do with it. Maybe it's something like the family has two kids that are just graduating high school and they're going to be empty nesters soon. All these different scenarios or potential, reasons for selling all have different things that we can do within the contract when we submit an offer to really make it not only a win for us, the buyer, but make it a win-win for both parties.
Yeah.
And that's something that is really important, obviously, to always be representing, the buyer first and foremost, but having this mindset of getting a nice open communication going with the other side of the transaction is also going to pay off down the road when we have a better relationship and maybe things get a little icky where we're trying to negotiate some seller concessions because the inspection uncovered some different things. But just being able to really have a good relationship from day one, build a win-win relationship with everybody involved, and just how important that is to really start off on the right foot. And it's always just a more likely chance of getting to the closing table when everybody's kind of on the same page and in a good mood. One other thing I'll share before getting Ben's take on this is an example. So let's just use the example of a family. They've got maybe a child that's a high school senior. We'll use like today, like right now, it's the end of March, going into April tomorrow. There's a lot of people out there that have kids that are graduating high school next month. Well, once their kid goes off to college, maybe they're ready finally to downsize. So by getting that info from the listing agent ahead of time, when I pick up the phone and call them, now what I can do is, for example, write in the offer that we're going to write a really good, attractive offer. We want to have the closing date be May 1st, 30 days from now. That's kind of a common time frame. However, the closing is May 1st, but we're going to give you can see on the screen here, what's called a PCOA or a post-closing occupancy agreement. This is just an example of a tool that we can maybe take out of our tool belt to, again, create a winning offer. We can say to them, you know what, we'll have the closing be on May 1st. On May 1st, you're going to sign on the dotted line. We're going to give you that $500,000 for your home. However, we're actually going to let you stay in that house for another 30 days. Maybe you're going to pay rent, maybe not. That's all something that would be negotiated in this. But what that is, a post-closing occupancy agreement, is allowing that seller to still basically get all that money from selling the home, have that additional time before leaving. And oftentimes this is great for the example I use. Maybe they have a kid that's graduating high school and they still want to have maybe some graduation parties and they don't want to be stressed with packing all their house up while they're enjoying the last few weeks with their child at home. But this way they're able to still win-win. They're able to sell their home. They're able to have a closing date that's still very attractive, but they're able to not need to leave the home maybe until June 1st. This is also great if they need to buy another home, but they need the proceeds of their current home to help pay for that. When you submit an offer, you can have what's called a conditional offer, meaning it's conditional on selling your other house, or it's conditional on maybe it's a 1031 exchange. I'm not going to go into all of those, but what's really important though is if you have a conditional offer, that usually is not as attractive or as much of a winning offer as if it's just a clean offer without any conditions. If you do this PCOA, that seller is able to, basically get all that money where they're putting an offer on their new home and it doesn't have to be conditional. So just, again, figuring out ways like this to be creative and craft that winning offer for you, the buyer, but also making it attractive to the seller.
When I first got into real estate and mortgage, I incorrectly believed that crafting a winning offer meant one side was going to win and one side was going to lose. I felt like if you were going to win, there had to be a loser. And I held on to that belief for several years. And as I got more experienced, I realized how a lot of times it wasn't correct, and exactly what Adam is saying. So as a buyer, that's why you want to have a plan. You have your strategy, you have your goals outlined, you know what you need. So for example, maybe you're looking to get that seller concession to pay for all of your closing costs, or you're looking to get that seller credit to pay for your temporary interest rate buy down. So you know what you want, you know what you need. Maybe you want to get a specific price reduction on a home. So Adam is going to represent you as the buyer, and he's going to put an offer together that outlines all of those things. But before he submits the offer, he's going to do that discovery call. He's going to call the seller and say, what is important to your seller? Maybe the seller wants to close on a specific date. Maybe they want to close on a specific time frame. They want to get this closed as quickly as possible. Maybe they want the earnest money to be a certain dollar amount. Maybe they want a post-closing occupancy agreement for 2 weeks. And so once he knows what's important to the seller, he can then draft a contract that is going to outline or highlight those things that are important to the seller, while also focusing on what is important to you as a buyer. And if both sides can get what they're looking for, a lot of time a deal can be worked out to the betterment of both parties. And that's exactly what crafting a winning offer does. And you would be shocked at how many agents do not do that discovery call. As I mentioned earlier, at North Point, I'm licensed in all 50 states. And so I'll work with agents all across the country. And I'm always shocked at how many buyers agents don't make any type of contact with the seller or the listing agent. They just send in the offer. They don't ask, what is your seller looking for? What's the motivation? Why are they selling? Is there anything I need to know? And that quick 2 to 5 minute conversation can make the difference between getting an offer accepted or not, or getting those seller concessions and some of those other things that you need as a buyer. And so that's why this right here, crafting a winning offer, is just so critically important.
Yeah, very well said. So once we've done that, we've got that offer, we've got it accepted. Now we're what's called the contract to close phase. And there's a lot of stuff that happens. For anybody that's on tonight that's maybe from a different state, every state has different dates and deadlines. Colorado, which is really, really great, it's really, really great because for buyers, it's a very buyer-friendly state, meaning that there's a lot of opportunities, a lot of different dates and deadlines once you're under contract to give you the opportunity to kind of get out if you are maybe just not feeling like it's the right one, or there's certain things that you just don't maybe agree with once you're under contract. You have a lot of opportunity as a buyer in Colorado. Other states, you don't have as many. For example, in Arizona, there's fewer dates and deadlines. So you have fewer opportunities to get out and protect what's called earnest money, which is that deposit, that money that you've put down just to basically have that ability to move forward where that home is no longer being marketed to other people. So anyways, we get to that contract to close phase. 2 of the biggest ones are the inspection and also the appraisal. I'll let Ben talk on the appraisal since that's very commonly done with any sort of a home loan or for a lender like Ben. But for the inspection, a couple things I just want to share with you guys on that. For anybody, again, that's not that familiar with how home inspections are done in Colorado, there's a couple that are always recommended on my end. I always recommend to my clients that they also do these 2, what we call supplemental inspections. The first one is for radon. So in Colorado, we have this odorless gas that can sometimes get trapped in subfloor space. So beneath the lowest level of your house, if you have a crawl space, this is a common area that this can happen in. And this radon gas can be harmful if it's above a certain level. So always, 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 whenever I do home inspections, if the home doesn't already have what's called a radon mitigation system, always recommend that this is done. It's only about 80, maybe it's a little bit more now, like $90. It's very, though, inexpensive to have this done. And by doing this, it just gives us the ability to, measure those readings from the radon test. And if it's high, we're able to use this as one of the objections during the inspection to try and get the seller to pay for a radon mitigation system. They're not that expensive, about $1,500, $2,000. Or if maybe it's at a level that's just barely on that cusp of being what's called, high or maybe concerning. If it's still maybe not quite at that level, but it's, getting near there, you could also just, negotiate with the seller just to give a credit at closing for that let's just say $2,000. So this gives us, again, negotiating power by doing these other little inspections. So that was one. The other one I want to share with you guys is the sewer scope. So sewer scopes can exist in all 50 states here in the US, but the reason they're so important here in Colorado, we have all these beautiful big trees, obviously, and a lot of these trees, as they get big and tall and old, they have the roots that kind of have a mind of their own and go everywhere. And what happens sometimes is these pipes for the sewer line that go from the house and typically connect to the main out in the middle of the street that the home is located on. What happens is oftentimes if the home is older, those sewer lines were actually made with clay, which can break down and deteriorate over years just on their own, but especially if any sort of tree roots are starting to impede, which can either completely crack the pipe or can even just create the small little, what we call bellies. So just a little flat area in the pipe where then it just isn't basically pushing all that through as quickly. And over time can get to the point where it can even back up into the house and cause all kinds of other headaches. So the sewer scope is also only about $125, but the cost, if this was to happen after you bought the home, sometimes just to access the sewer line is several feet underground. It could, be a huge undertaking. I had a home a few years back that we were under contract on, and this was an issue, and it ended up getting quoted at over $30,000 to make the repair. So very, very expensive if you don't catch this. And that's why it's so important, I think, to almost always do this as well during the inspection phase. But there's obviously a lot of other things that are identified in the regular part of the home inspection, which is very, very important to always have done, even if it's a newer built home, even a brand new home for that matter. I always still recommend having an inspection done.
Yeah. And then in regards to the appraisal, what this is and why it's important, it's an independent third-party opinion of value. Now, if you have any type of government loan, USDA, FHA, or VA on a purchase, an appraisal is going to be required. More than likely, it'll also be required on a conventional loan if you're putting less than 20% down. Now, in some cases, on a Fannie Mae or Freddie Mac conventional loan, if there's enough recent sales in the neighborhood within a 1 mile radius over the past 6 months, you may not need an appraisal if your down payment is at least 20%. For the most part, though, more than likely an appraisal will be required. Now, the bank is going to order the appraisal, but it's not a bank representative. It's not a bank affiliate. It's not a bank employee. It's a true third-party opinion of value. And this is important for two reasons. Number one, it is a way of protecting the bank. They want to make sure that the money they are going to be lending, that there is sufficient collateral or equity in the property to make the deal happen. So if you're under contract at $500,000 and you go and get the appraisal, well, they want to make sure that the property, even though the buyer and seller have agreed to sell the property for $500,000, the bank wants an independent third party that the home is really worth what the two parties are saying it is, or what they've agreed upon as far as the sales price. Now, more importantly, though, and this is kind of an indirect benefit, is that it protects your interest as the buyer. It protects the bank's interest, but it also protects your interest as the buyer, because you want to make sure that the home you are purchasing is also worth at least as much as the sales contract indicates. Now, as Adam said a moment ago, Colorado is very pro buyer with our Colorado real estate contract. So you can literally cancel a contract in the state of Colorado, get all of your earnest money back for things like homeowners insurance, home inspection, title, loan objection deadlines, title insurance, and appraisal is also one of those. So if the home doesn't appraise, meaning that if the sales price or the agreed upon price is $500,000, and let's say that the home doesn't appraise, it appraises at $490,000, you have the ability to A, either cancel the contract and get your earnest money back, or B, renegotiate with the seller at the reduced appraised value. So you have both of those options. Now, I have not seen appraisals in this Denver marketplace come back less. I have seen that in some other markets where appraised values have come in less than the sales price. I have not seen that on my Denver metro purchases. What I am seeing, though, is I am seeing properties go under contract. In that same example, let's say the sales contract is $500,000. I'm still seeing appraisals come in at or above what the agreed upon sales price is. And if that's the case, well, then you know that you're buying a property that's worth more than what you're paying for. So say, for example, the home appraises for 510,000. The sales contract is 500,000, but then you get the appraisal back and it says 510,000. Well, you know, as a buyer that you have instant equity right from day one on top of any down payment that you're putting into the transaction. And it's not something that you need to disclose to the seller. So even if they are providing seller credits, or maybe they've already reduced the sales price, even if you are negotiating some things during inspection, that's not something that you need to redisclose to the seller. You just know that the home is worth more than what you're paying for it.
It's always a great problem to have. Once we've gone through that, now we're ready for the final step, step 5, which is the closing and final walkthrough. So kind of like this last one, I'll do the final walkthrough and I'll let Ben handle the closing day. So for final walkthrough, I just wanted to really hit this for a second because this is another one that often gets overlooked. And a final walkthrough is basically you've been under contract on the home, gotten through all the other dates and deadlines. Closing date is tomorrow. So we'll use that as an example. So tomorrow is Wednesday, April 1st. Maybe not the best day to do the closing or a final walkthrough since it's April Fool's Day. Can only imagine some of the jokes that would happen from that. But
and that's why we're doing this tonight.
Exactly. But the final walkthrough, that's basically the last opportunity you have as the buyer to just walk through the home and make sure that it is exactly as is, meaning as is expected based off of what has been included in the contract to buy the property. So let's just use as an example, there's the living room. When you first walk in, it's got this massive, beautiful chandelier. It really brings the room together. It's awesome. When you were under contract, when you wrote up the offer on the contract and it was accepted, there was nothing in there about, that chandelier being a personal property item, that it would be, an inclusion, meaning that an exclusion, meaning that they were going to be taking it with them when the home was sold. So you expect that chandelier to be there when you do the final walkthrough. And that final walkthrough usually is done either the night before or the morning of the closing, just so you can catch any little things like this as late as you possibly can before the closing happens. You walk into the home and that chandelier is gone. Maybe that homeowner forgot that it was a family heirloom and they forgot to put it as an exclusion in the contract and they're freaking out and they just took it anyways. Well, as the buyer, you have the ability to obviously, put a hold on the closing, making sure that that is addressed in one way or another. Maybe it's renegotiating that seller is going to put another couple $1,000s, back into your pocket to help pay for that, whatever it may be. Just how important it is more than anything else, just to have your eyes on the property as late as you possibly can before closing, just to ensure that it is exactly as you expect it. I'm not going to share the whole story, but another example of this could be, a flood. Oftentimes when homes are being sold, they've already found their next home and they've already vacated the home. So that home that you're interested in buying is vacant, meaning nobody's living in it. Well, maybe, they went to get their irrigation sprinkler lines turned on last weekend, right before the closing, maybe just to be good, good sellers and just wanting to make sure the yard doesn't die. Maybe they forgot to tighten up a little, bolt or a nut on the bottom of the irrigation line. And you go in that morning of the closing and there's 6 inches of water in the basement because they didn't do it correctly. And I'm using that story specifically because that happened. So there's just a lot of things that can get caught by doing this final walkthrough. And if you don't do it, you go to the closing table, you buy the home, and then you go over to the house and you're super excited and you're ready to pop champagne and just celebrate with your family. If that floods in the basement, now it's your responsibility, not the seller's. So really, really important.
Yeah. And then on closing day, that's a day that you will remember more than likely for the rest of your life, especially if you're buying your first home or your dream home. I remember buying my first home in 2010. I remember going to get the earnest money check and then the closing funds at the Wells Fargo inside the Fry's grocery store at 83rd Avenue in Lower Buckeye. And I remember how excited I was. The teller's name was Alejandra. I remember all of these specific details. And then I took that closing fund for my down payment straight over to the title company and then went on with my closing. But it should be a very exciting day. When you are closing, more than likely, you will be at a title office. Your real estate agent is usually going to be there. There's also going to be a public notary, somebody that's going to witness the signing and the transaction. And certain documents will actually be notarized, meaning that the witness is putting a stamp on the documents and then signing them. as a identified third party. Now, when you're signing all of your closing documents, there's going to be different packages involved. There's going to be documents that you sign between you and your lender. That's going to be all of your loan documents. The note, for example, that's going to outline the loan terms, the final closing disclosure that outlines all of the costs and everything that is itemized or included in the loan. It's also going to break down the payment, the loan application, which is 3 or 4 pages, and it gives your 2-year residence history, your 2-year employment history, breakdown of your income, asset, employment, and credit profile. There's going to be documents that you sign between yourself and the seller. Most notably, the documents that transfer vesting or ownership. If there's any utilities or water that needs to get transferred, you're going to be signing those as well, getting the utilities transferred into your name. You're going to be signing documents between yourself and the title company as well. An example of that would be the final settlement statement, which is very similar to the closing disclosure. Again, just giving an overview or a recap of the transaction. And after everything is signed and notarized and you've provided your funds and the bank has sent the wire, and normally the wire is there in advance of the closing, and usually the seller is going to be signing either right before or right after the buyer's closing. But after all the dust is settled and everything has been signed and notarized, and that's when you get the keys and the home becomes yours. Usually it happens that same day. Now, in some cases, if you're signing in advance or if there's some type of post-occupancy agreement, that may be a little bit different on case-by-case basis. But all in all, it should be a very exciting day. And your lender is usually available for questions. The escrow officer is usually there as well. The notary can be a great resource. And then your buyer's agent is usually present at the transaction during the closing.
It's an exciting day. Well, now we're just going to kind of recap. I always like to do this at the end because these are so important, guys. So if there's 3 big mistakes that home buyers make, they still make them today. So these are just really important just to kind of close this part out. Number 1, overlooking hidden costs. So just remember that there's a lot more that goes into the cost of a home than just that home loan. You know, there's other things, property taxes, home insurance. If you're in a neighborhood that might have a HOA, a homeowner association, there's just a lot of other things that's so important to be aware of and making sure that you're understanding all of this on the front end and not after you've purchased the home. So little quick plug, when you guys start looking at homes, definitely find somebody like Ben that can go a lot more in depth with sharing all of this kind of stuff with you before you even write an offer on the home. Actually pulling a quote for what home insurance would be for that home. You know, seeing exactly what the HOA monthly costs might be, what the annual property taxes are, all this kind of stuff is just so important to be aware of early on, just to make sure that it fits with what you're looking for. And then I'm broken record on this one, but just never skipping home inspections, even if it's a new build, a brand new home. Oftentimes these ones are uncovering just as many issues as older homes on the inspection. So really important. The only other thing I'm going to add on this one is if you are still pushing back on this, it's a brand new home. Why do I need to do a home inspection, Adam? Well, an alternative, I always just say this as the last straw. If you just still aren't really willing to do a home inspection, usually with a new build, new construction home, the builder is going to give you a 1-year warranty. So another option is having this home inspection done after you've actually purchased the home and lived in it for about 6 to 8 months. Having an inspection done, then identifying anything that might be coming up, and then therefore you're able to still, submit a claim with the builder before that 12-month expiration on the warranty. So just get it done one way or the other. I still recommend always doing it ahead of time, but it's super important to do home inspections. And then last but not least, this is the one that Ben is very adamantly passionate about: emotional decision-making, just really understanding that this is, one of the biggest decisions you're ever going to make, making sure that you're going into it with a level head, and you've done all this stuff that we've been talking through tonight on the early stages of the home buying process, just to eliminate or at least minimize the amount of emotion that's going into this decision. Ben, I know we're kind of coming up on an hour, but maybe just give like a 60-second story about your open house that I always like hearing you share about, somebody that walked in, nosy neighbor, and then ended up
Yeah. I love sharing this story. Number one, because it's true, but it also really emphasizes this emotional decision-making point. So a couple years ago, I was doing an open house with a friend of mine, and my role was I was supposed to be greeting people at the door as they come in. So this couple comes in and I greet them and I ask them if they are in the market to buy. And they're like, no, 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 no. We just live down the street. We live in the neighborhood. We're out walking our dog. Just wanted to come in and check out the open house. Well, 10 minutes later, after they're done walking the house, they're talking with me about writing an offer to buy it. 10 minutes ago, you were not even in the market. You were walking the dog down the street, and now you want to go buy a new home? And so that is not where you want to be. You want to be able to put a plan together. You want to be able to think through things rationally. When you get, there's a side of it where it's important to be emotional because this home represents your family, your dreams, your vision for your future. And so from that element, be emotional, but you don't want the emotions to drive your decision making.
Absolutely. That just still blows me away. All right, guys. So bonus tips to succeed. I know I've shared this a couple other times already tonight, but just one last time. After tonight, I'll be sending an email with a bunch of stuff just to really help you guys take that next step with educating yourselves to be in that position to succeed when that time maybe comes, maybe doesn't, but hopefully it does for you guys someday. Just making sure that you're always staying flexible, being open to different neighborhoods, different types of homes, always still considering that new construction as an option, especially right now with the interest rates being a bit higher, and at least entertaining that as a possibility. And then knowing about some of these other expenses that do come up and just being prepared ahead of time so that doesn't cut you guys off guard. Next steps, obviously, with Ben, I'm going to share his info as well in that email tonight. So if you have any questions on maybe things that you just didn't feel comfortable asking in the chat tonight, I know I think Michael was really engaged. So Michael, thanks for asking some questions tonight. But for anybody else that maybe just didn't feel comfortable or maybe just wasn't sure on what to ask, maybe you think of a question later on tonight or tomorrow, we're always available. We can always just do a phone call, or always love doing Zoom calls where it's just a private one-on-one, or if you want both of us on that call with you, we can both be there as well. But just wanting to really make it very clear that we're always available to help answer any questions. And we love the opportunity more than anything else just to learn more about you guys and hopefully find a few ways that we can provide even more value to you. With that all being said, let's go ahead and open it up to any questions if there are any. Again, I think Michael had asked a few questions, but I think I saw he had to bounce. He got off. It said had to run. But for anybody else that maybe has a question they'd like to ask now, we'll stick around for a few more minutes. And if not, don't be a stranger. Feel free to ask questions, shoot us an email, give us a call, whatever's most convenient for you. Ben, any closing words on your end?
Yeah, the biggest thing is, when people say they're nervous or when they say that they're hesitant, I get why. Like I truly do understand that. And we were talking before the call. What's most important for the prospective home buyer is not trying to time the market. It's time in the market. And how do you know when it's appropriate to get into the market, to start that clock, when it's right for you? And so that's where you want to make sound financial decisions. You want to know what your options are, what you're eligible for. And you can't do that unless you talk with a lender. Are you eligible for any first-time homebuyer programs? Is there any down payment assistance programs that might benefit you? Do you have any specific goals or needs? And so getting pre-approved, talking with a lender or a real estate agent, it doesn't obligate you. It doesn't cost anything. There's not any risk involved, but it will empower you to, at a minimum, at least get the information you need so you can then go make an informed decision on your timing, on if now is a good time to enter the market. But you can't do that if you never get the information.
Yeah, I would really maybe even just push the idea of thinking of you almost more of like a coach, Ben. I mean, you're very, very passionate about just financial literacy, helping people be in a position where they are confident when that time comes to make this decision. Just think about that person that you are talking to, the lender like Ben, that they really are like a coach. They're just helping you prepare. They're helping you get some reps in as far as maybe getting some of that information put together, maybe getting that credit score improved. Ben's here to help. So am I. The more you can lean on people like that and help you get to that position where you are in the best place possible, that's just something that a lot of people don't do. And it's just such an easy way to succeed in life and especially in real estate.
I'm the coach, and you know what I'm doing? I'm putting you in the game. It's time to get in the real estate game. Let's go.
I like it. I like it.
Mic drop.
Mic drop. Yep.
End in the webinar.
All right, guys. Well, we'll stick around for 2 more minutes. If you have any questions, feel free to answer them now or forever hold your peace. Otherwise, shoot us an email or a text or give us a phone call. All right, I'm going to end the recording.